We started off kind of designing hydrocarbon and CO2 systems for mom and pop processors, time kind of before the rec legalization that happened in California. So we're on the medical side. We are based out of Santa Rosa. We started off with a two-man crew, my dad and myself, and very quickly found a need from the industry to do custom systems. So basically building custom hydrocarbon systems. The infrastructure of concentration at the time is a pretty heavy flower market in the cannabis industry. The trend was starting to go towards concentration of the molecule itself and isolation of the molecules. So, I have a background in R&D processing for Agilent Technologies that kind of gave me my base of obsession of processing. And starting with that, we started processing cannabinoids and kind of found our path. Found out there was a niche for it. We had a lot of people from Northern California, the tri-counties, asking for custom systems, and we were one of the first, what I would say, equipment manufacturers that was specifically designing their equipment around the pinch points of the process of cannabis concentration.
Yeah. So you started with a two-man crew with just you and your dad. Like, how big is the operation now?
Right now we're a little bit under 40, so we're 48 people, under 50 people. And we've grown quite a bit in the last 2 years because of the demand for concentrates and speed to market for brands and how to get that.
What were some of the specific pinch points that you designed your machine to kind of overcome?
The hydrocarbon and CO2 were pretty much the main focus of concentration for the first, what I would call first round of cannabis concentration. There was a high push towards a green technology that can get the cannabinoid stripped from the plant. A lot of people started adopting supercritical CO2. Butane, propane, and hydrocarbon was kind of left in that unknown no man's land as far as whether that was going to be a compliant, large-scale, scalable process. We started off focusing on CO2, and after we actually built a couple systems and realized that the throughput on those was not going to match the demand of the market, we started looking for alternatives, and that alternative came when we started investigating ethanol processing.
What is the current demand of the market right now in terms of throughput?
There's a whole different thing that's coming up around concentrates. There's connoisseur markets, there's connoisseur products. There's also how do you get the molecule to its purest form so that you can actually dose it in the different products that are coming out. And so what we see is that there's still viable flower market, but the molecule is really what people are after. So whether it's THCV, CBD, CBN, those molecules, those cannabinoids are actually target for what I would consider the next wave of cannabis.
Okay. So did you say you do CO2, hydrocarbon, and ethanol, or are you specifically ethanol now?
Specifically ethanol now. We started off with CO2 and hydrocarbon. Definitely moved and put our whole business model into ethanol processing.
How did that decision take place?
Sure. So I have, from a background, I worked for the city of Santa Rosa in their industrial waste department for 4 years after I worked for Agilent. And we were compliance officers as well. So we went through different industrial facilities, find out what their discharge was, set samplers, did a lot of chain of custodies to the lab, did the tests in the lab for their discharge. When we found out as far as what the compliance regulations and the permitting process is going to require from an ethanol versus a hydrocarbon versus CO2, the compliance part of that, the ethanol was the most developed. And so they had already had a lot of regulation, a lot of rules, compliance from a fire marshal standpoint. So ethanol became the natural path to, okay, if we're going to go to a rec or a manufacturing, scalable manufacturing point, that ethanol was going to be the way to go.
Okay, so your setup is in the Pro Pod right now. So tell me a little bit about the pod solution.
Right now there's a huge pinch point in permitting. A lot of the regulating bodies are having a hard time understanding exactly how the process works and where the safety factors are. So what the fire marshals are looking for, they're looking for already compliant equipment that they can go through, do a quick investigation on, sign off and say, okay, hey, this is safe for use for this type of application. What we've done with the Pro Pod is we've allowed, instead of going through a whole conditional use permit or a building application where you're taking an architecture, we're streamlining that process and just giving them an actual compliant space to work in with our equipment. You drop it in and it's ready to go.
Okay. I mean, it's an impressive site. Like, do you see a lot of people that look at it and think like, I don't need this, but actually it would be a really good fit for their facility?
Sure, absolutely. I think the bigger thing is when they get into about 2 to 3 months of overhead spending waiting for a use permit on their architecture, that's when they generally start to look at something like this and go, nope, we just need to get operational. This is UL certified, state certified, it's FM approved. It streamlines the whole process through a conditional use permit where they're not have to do an architectural plans and drawings and figuring, okay, what's the rating? He's already 2 to 4 hour rating, firewalls, totally compliant. So it streamlines that process and gets people up and operational quick.
Okay. And the pod is the result of a partnership, correct?
Correct.
Who did you guys partner with?
So we partner with MCC. MCC is a subsidiary of a much larger industrial corporation. They build out compliant labs and clean rooms. They approached us as far as a potential partnership with introducing our equipment into the industry within a already drop-in ready lab. Okay. And through working with the relationship, we've become very close partners, and we're kind of in each other's camp now. So yeah, it's been a good relationship.
Like, because it's kind of just drop in, sort of plug and play, like, what are some of the cool applications or like setups that you've seen one of your pods or equipment go into?
Sure. So one of the big applications that we're seeing coming up is that these things can be put on a semi-truck, okay, dropped into a field with a generator, and then they process until they're done, and it gets picked up and dropped in another field. And so the ability to kind of quickly put in a processing space, pull that out, and we're trying to get into lease options as well, where someone can lease it for 3 months as they're processing. So there's a lot of business models that are attached to not having to own completely the capital equipment for each person, but different ways of hardware as a service, different ways of processing as a service, as well as if the clients need to buy the whole package just to put in a warehouse as well, it's ready to go.
What's your outlook for the industry, like over the next year and then the next 5 years?
So the outlook is going to be, it's a difficult one because a lot of the market has switched over to hemp because of the price of CBD isolate and CBD distillate, full spectrum extraction. And with that, because of the farm bill taking place, is that there's a lot of crop space that is underutilized, and a lot of people are switching over to hemp. With a lot of the people switching over to hemp, there's a huge influx of biomass that comes into that. How do you process that, right? How do you handle 3 million pounds of biomass with a solvent extraction? Yeah. We see that as being the biggest pinch point of the future of this industry, is how do you do biomass reduction in a way that actually makes sense, that the overhead cost of compliance for solvent extraction and everything else matches the actual end dollar that you're getting for the product. So we see it as more of, how do we allow the farmers to have the power to control before they have to let go of their biomass? If we could do a bio-reduction, if we could do something on site with the farmer, so he has a commodity sell besides the flower.
So is that what they have to do to make it make sense?
I have a feeling in the end it's going to be a numbers game like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard that a lot, where people have gone to see industrial hemp grow operations, and everything's growing great, but they do not have the processing equipment. Okay.
There isn't a very strong solution for that right now. If you look at process throughput, even if 25,000 pounds of biomass a day, it's going to be very difficult from a compliance standpoint to have multiple systems in a jurisdiction. What they'll probably end up doing is going for large ethanol plants that have a strap-on column or something like that. It's just the mass amount of biomass is going to be the biggest challenge for the industry. And that's what you see with the equipment companies. They're getting bigger and bigger, trying to tackle that, but what you're really looking at is a major plant size operation where thousands and thousands or millions of pounds can be processed.
Okay. What are your overall thoughts on the show, Ben, this year?
The show's been we've been to NCIA 4 years in a row. This is the first time where I've seen the companies that are actually on the floor, they're pretty developed. Before, there's a lot of trial and error of concept designs and people kind of getting their compass needle down of like, is this business model going to work in this cannabis space? And I've seen a lot of those companies fall off in the last few years. And the main point is the people who are that have a viable business model that works with cannabis. We're seeing a lot of that here at this show.
Okay. One thing I'm curious about is, you can kind of drop this and be up and running right away. Like, what do you need from like a maintenance standpoint?
Maintenance standpoint is just like it is in any other equipment industry. You have service, whether it's quarterly, yearly or bi-yearly. The idea is that you want to always keep up and operational. So if you look at wine or the spirits industries, generally they have a cyclical cycle where they do a lot of production and then they do post-processing. Generally before a large production process, they get their systems tuned and serviced. And so that's what, we're developing our customer service based on like a subscription service model where we're sitting, we know that the clients are going to start running a large crop here. We'll come in, we'll service the bearings, we'll service the seals, we'll do what we need to do to make sure that, and it's a subscription base. If they choose not to do that, it breaks down halfway through harvest, and you obviously, just like any other industry, you start running into major pinch points to try to get people out there to service it. So we're looking we truly are looking at the winery model. We're in Sonoma County, Napa County. We've seen a lot of equipment, whether it's plate disc centrifuges, go down very quickly in the middle of harvest. Harvest is a major pinch point if you don't have the equipment running for processing.